Good morning. Today we are going to discuss the methods of teaching, the Unit 4, Part 1 in mathematics. Disclaimer: the video content has been made available for informational and educational purpose only. Let's start with the method of teaching. The main aim of the mathematics education in school is the mathematician of the child's thought process. In the words of David Wheeler, it is more useful to know how to mathematize than to know a lot of mathematics. According to George Polya, we can think of two kinds of aims for the school education: a good and narrow aim, that is, turning out employable adults who contribute to social and economic development. A higher aim is developing the inner resource of growing child. With regard to the school mathematics, the former aim specifically relate to numeracy, primary school teach numbers, operations on the measurement of quantities, fractions, percentage, and ratios. All these are important for numeracy. The high aim of focus on developing a child's inner resources. The role that mathematics plays is mostly about thinking, clarity of thought. Pursuing the assumptions to logical conclusion is central to mathematical enterprise. There are many ways of thinking, and the kind of thinking one learn in mathematics is an ability to handle abstractions. Even more importantly, mathematics offers is a way of doing things like to be able to solve mathematical problems and more generally to have the right attitude for the problem solving and to be able to attack all kind of problems in a systematic manner. In the Indian context, there is a concern which has an impact on school education, namely that of the universalization of schooling. This has two important implications for the discussion on the curriculum, especially the mathematics. Firstly, schooling is a legal right, and mathematics being a compulsory subject of study. Access to the quality mathematics education is in every child's right, keeping in mind the Indian reality where few children have access to expensive material and mathematics education that is affordable and enjoyable to every child. This implies that mathematical thought is situated in the child's live reality and that for the system. It is not the subject that matters more than the child, but the other way about. Secondly, in a country where nearly half the children drop out of the school during the elementary stages, mathematics curricula cannot be grounded only on the preparation for the high secondary and the university education. Still, have a substantial proportion of children existing the system after class 8. It is then fair to ask what 8 years of school mathematics offer for such children in terms of the challenges they will face afterwards. Concepts and meaning of approaches. Think of the approach to teaching as description of how to go about teaching the students. The description explains what is needed when it is taught. Typically, it might be described as follows: the sort of teaching and learning activities that have planned lecture, tutorial, self directed learning, case study, workshop, and workplace learning. The ways in which try to engage the students with the subject matter, provide students with the basic facts related to the new knowledge to what students already know, built-in interactions. Be passionate, be enthusiastic. The way in which to support the students, encourage questions, set formative assessments, and provide constructive feedback. A description of the paragraph to the teaching includes mode or the manner of teaching, lecture, tutorial, beside teaching, and laboratory works. Some understanding of how people learn, that is learning theory. Some understanding of how to facilitate learning, like qualities of the teacher, such as passion, principle for good teaching, practice, such as providing timely and constructive feedback, putting educational theory into practice. There is no best teaching approach. However, there are some recognized teaching methods together with a range of learning theories and some principles for the good practice in education. Being a reflective teacher and striving for excellence in teaching means considering each aspects of the teaching exercise to ensure that your approach is to facilitate the student learning. Let's move on to the learning theories. A brief summary of the three of the main theories is provided below. In fact, it is possible to subscribe all three views depending on the subject matter being taught to the students. First one, objective conceive of learning as a process in which learners passively receive an object body of the knowledge that is transmitted to them. A teaching should be structured to transmit the required knowledge of the learner. Cognitive view learning as a process in which learners add new components to their cognitive structure. The structure through which the human process and the store informations and or in which the learners recognize their existing cognitive structures, occur new elements in their cognitive structure. A constructive activist that learners construct their own reality, or at least that learners interpret reality based upon their interpretation of their experience. This entails that an individual's acquisition of knowledge is a function of their prior experience, mental structures, and the belief that are used to interpret objects and events. A teaching should be structured to help the students to relate new knowledge to the existing knowledge so that what is learned is meaningful for the learners. When this happens, recall and application of knowledge improves. Let's move on to principle for good practice in undergraduate education. These following seven principles for the good practice have been established on the basis of our view of over 50 years of educational research. Encourages the context between the student and faculty. It's developed the reciprocity and the cooperation among the students. It's used the active learning techniques, and it gives a prompt feedback. And the fifth one is emphasize time on the task. And sixth one is communication high expectations, respect diverse talents and way of learning. Any approach to the teaching students might make use of these principles. So, what are the principles of the good practice in undergraduate education? The following seven principles for the good practice, like encourage the contact between the students and the faculty, develop the reciprocity and cooperation among the students, use the active learning techniques, give the prompt feedback, emphasize time on the task, communicates high expectations, respect to diverse talents and way of learning. Let's move on to method and techniques. The term teaching method refers to the general principles, pedagogy, and management strategies used for the classroom instructions. The choice of teaching method depends on what fits to your education philosophy, a classroom demographics, a subject areas, and the school mission statement. A teaching theories primarily fall into two categories or approaches: a teacher centered and the student centered. Teaching theories primarily falls into two categories. One is teacher centered and another one is student centered. A maths teacher must teach the building blocks of the maths, such as the number sense and operational skills, boosting the students' ability to think about problems. They need to incorporate aspects of the language, including reading and writing, into their subject and provide direct instruction on method of explorations. Additionally, the maths teacher must motivate students to try and teach them to preserve when the problems are challenging. Next topic is the best method and strategies for a quality maths program. A method of teaching maths. Regarding a method of instructions, what are the best methods and strategies for the quality maths program? Method of teaching maths: use visuals, make connections, and use assessments and strategies and techniques. First, start with the method for the teaching maths. Regarding a method of instruction, it is meant how content is being taught. This runs the gamut for the style of instructions. For example, lecture versus hand-on to material used. Use the visuals. Many students need to see a lesson in addition to hearing it. While explaining an operation or the skill, use a visual or graphic to help get the point across. This can be simple as showing the lesson on a document camera using a video or other technology tool. The children do best when the instruction is paired with a visual. Using a visual as a standalone teaching device is not always effective. A teacher should vary the usage to keep the students engaged. Make connections. Our brain are machines that thrive on connections. In fact, long-term memory is a complicated web of neurons or the brain cells banded together. To help the students make sense of concept, provide them with the connections to the real world or previously taught lessons. We should always begin a new lesson with a reminder of the lost. Also, we should pay close attention to how the students react to the connections the teacher makes. Use the assessment. Mathematics is typically a progression based subject, a skill built upon one another and in an order in which they thought ID predetermined. Because of this, a max teacher does not have to think much about what to teach when, but it is necessary to use the assessment to determine the student's understanding. A formative assessments or the informal assessments meant to check in on the student's learning and drive the future instruction should be used frequently. This can help the teachers identify the students who struggle and allow additional groups or one-on-one instructions. The formative assessments are not usually taken for grades. The students need to feel the comfortable with their exploration of a subject without fear of their performance being used for grading. Strategies and techniques. Max is all about the problem solving using the strategies. Sometimes there is only one way to solve a problem, but many times there are multiple avenues to the answer. When teaching, model several strategies for understanding and exploring a concept. Encourage the students to apply high level skills when given problems and focus on the thought process involved in the solution. Although Max usually only has one right answer, being able to reason through the steps to find the answer is the most important part of being a successful Max student. We want our students to be a mathematical thinker. This means they need to think strategically about solving Max problem. A strategy then is a way to instruct for the maximum benefits. A teacher uses strategies to help students learn maths as well. Thinking about how to best deliver a lesson is foremost in quality teaching. Let's revise the best method and strategies for the for the quality max program. Method for teaching mathematics. Regarding method of instruction, it is mean how content is being taught. This runs the gamut on for the style of instructions from the example lecture versus hand-to-hand materials. Use visuals. Many students need to see lessons in addition to hearing it. Make connections. Our brains are machines that drive on connections. In fact, the long-term memory is complicated web of neurons or the brain celled together to help the students make sense of the concept, provide them the connection to the real world or previously taught lessons. We should always begin a new lesson with a reminder of the lost. Also, we should pay close attention to how the students react to the connections the teacher makes and use the assessments. Mathematics is typically a progression based subject, skills built upon one another and the other and order in which they thought its ID is determined predetermined. Because of this, a max teacher does not have to think about much about what to teach when, but it is necessary to use assessment to determine the students' understanding. Strategies and techniques. Max is all about problem solving using strategies. Sometimes there are only one way to solve a problem, but many times there are multiple avenues to the answer. So the type of teaching methods, teaching methods are categorized into two classes. One is teacher-centered method and people-centered method. Teacher-centered method is lecture come demonstration, historical. People-centered method is heuristic, project, assignment, discussions, and inductive deductions. A teacher-centered method, lecture method. In our teaching, the lecture method dominates to a very great extent. The lesson is that it has been for too long with us. As a matter of fact, the most teacher find lectures almost indispensable for the certain purpose. Lectures can be used for motivating large number of peoples at the same time. The introducing activities for the groups of the people in the class, for summing up at the end of the units, and for explaining difficult points. They are particularly used for bridging the gaps between the topics to be studied in depth, for presenting information would otherwise be unavailable to the pupils. The method is very convenient to the teacher who needs no practical preparations. In this method, the teachers occupies the central place in the teaching the learning process. In spite of money values, the formal lecture is ordinarily in ineffective method for the teaching secondary school pupils because the learning forms the lecturers is relatively passive learning. It may be sterile learning also. Pupils learn better when they put themselves into the learning. Unless the people do something with the information presented in lecture, their learning and retentions are liable to be rather than a good lecture requires more preparation than most teachers have time to give them. Very seldom can the teacher lecture effectively on the spur of the moment. If a teacher wants a high degree of effectiveness to his lecture, he must plan them very well. Not only must he plan what he wishes to say, but he should also plan what he intends to say. What are the advantage of lecture method? This method is economical because no laboratory apparatus aids required. The single teacher can teach a large number of students at a student time, which is impossible by any other method. It is a good method of imparting voluminous information in comparison to other method of teaching. This is so because much information can be supplied to the students in a short time. It is usual in imparting factual information is in relation to some time of thrilling historical and biological incidents in the science. The factual information can be five in an effective and interesting way by this method. Provided the teacher has a good personality and his manners and manner of appeal are good, and the use of the method with humor and interesting anecdotes. Listening to lectures give an opportunity to the people to have some experience and be attentive. A well prepared and well delivered lecture saves the time of the people. What are the disadvantages of the lecture method? This method is against the principle of learning by doing. The students are not involved in the teaching the learning process at all in his method. The children are not active participants in the learning process but only passive listeners, which is psychological. The organization of the material may incomplete. A teacher may lay under emphasis on detail. The language used may be very dry in presentation without humor. Then the lecturer fails to make his impression on his people. The lecture method is a taxing method on the part of the students. This method gives very little chance of testing the previous knowledge of the peoples. The capacity to understand various forms, student to student, as a class is a heterogeneous group of students. There is no assurance whether the students understand all that the teacher is saying. The rate if impairing informations by the teacher may at any time too rapid for the learner to get necessary connections of the thoughts. Applications in the pure form, lecture method is unsuited for the middle and high school classes, but it cannot be adapted to suit our needs. But punctuating by giving opportunities to the peoples to answer them and ask questions frequently and clear doubts, and by visualing aids and blackboard freely. In this adapted form, the lecture method has a distinct places in the teaching of mathematics. Whenever we introduce a new topic or a new specimen, it has a definite place. For example, wild animals, water plants, etc. But should such talk should always be brief and richly illustrated so that the interest is created even at the start. Whenever we conduct a series of experiments under the same topic, the photosynthesis, transpiration, they may remind us a children's incomplete knowledge which should be filled in by the teacher or the informal talk. The most valuable use of this method is encourage the peoples in learning more about the lives of great pioneers of science like Louis Pasteur, Robert Koch, Ronald Rolls, Charles Darwin. Such type of talks have a very definite place in the science. It is however suggested that along with the lecture method, practicing of note taking should be given to the students high and higher secondary stage. Lecture should be followed by written test to measure the success of the lecture. At the end of the lecture, the opportunity should be provided to the students to ask questions and to answer the questions and to make sure that salient points have been understood by the students. You know that lecture method have immediate advantages, so the lecture has a strong influence on the teaching method. The students have to listen quietly, take notes, and assimilate information within the stipulated time. But the learning process is not simple. Pouring in method lecture is not recommended at secondary level. Teachers should limit themselves to briefly presentation, such short descriptions of the process statement of the fact. Any oral presentation is effective only to the degree with the imagines are entered. That is why the slide exhibits and demonstration materials are helpful to speech. How to make the lecture effective? Let us see how to make the lectures effective. Content should be presented systematically. Objective should be stated clearly. The outline of the content should be presented. Pertinent illustration should be used. There should be an element of humor. Experience should be shared. Summarization should be carried out done, and a teacher's personality should be borne in mind. Speed must be appropriate. How to make lecture effective? Let us see how to make the lecture effective. Content should be presented systematically. Objectives should be stated clearly. Outline of the content should be presented. Budget and illustration should be used. There should be an element of humor. Experience should be shared. Summarization should be carried out, and then and the a teacher's personality should be borne in mind. A speed must be appropriate. Voice should be audible, clear, impressive on the modulator. Pronunciation must be approachable. People should be encouraged to take notes during the lecture using the following methods, like outline method, The people should be encouraged to take notes during the lecture using the following method. One is the outline method, salient point method, verbatim method, shorthanded method. The teacher should possess extensive reading habit. Appropriate teaching aids should be used appropriately. Interaction should be maintained by questioning the pupils and clarifying their doubts. Dictating notes should be avoided. So let's repeat how to make the lecture effective. Content should be presented, objectives should be stated, outline of the content should be presented, pertinent illustration should be provided, there should be element of humor, experience should be shared, summarization should be carried out on those. Teacher's personality should be borne in mind, speed must be appropriate, voice should be audible, clear, impressive, and modulated. Pronunciation must be approachable, and during lectures we have to use the following methods: outline method, salient point view method, verbatim method, shorthand method. Teacher should possess extensive reading habit. Appropriate teaching aids should be used properly. Interactions should be maintained by questioning the pupils and clarifying the doubts. Dictating notes should be avoided.